Could you tell me a little bit about your background? Where did you get your undergrad, your graduate degree, and any advanced degrees?
I did my undergrad work at the University of Wyoming. I actually did an associate's degree at a community college before that. And then my graduate work was at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and then I got this job.
Could you tell me a little bit about this study? What did you and your colleagues look at?
This is one in a whole series of studies that we did. We've been looking for many years at young children's learning from video, their understanding of video and their learning from it. And the overall story is that when children are 2, up until about the time they're 3, they learn much better from a person who's directly talking to them, demonstrating or teaching them something face to face than they do from a person on video. So this study, we were wondering whether if a child was Skyping with the person, would that improve things? If they were really interacting with the person, would it improve it?
How would you be able to get those genuine interactions between the child and the person on Skype?
In this particular study, the researcher did not use the child's name. They made eye contact through the camera, and then they would be responsive to the child's attention. So if the child looked away or was distracted, they would slow down, they would stop, and they would wait for the child to focus again, and then they would be responsive again. They would use social cues like looking at the camera, saying, "Look what I'm doing," and so there were little bids for attention like, "Look what I'm doing now." But it followed a script, and it followed the same script whether they were in person, really in person, or on the screen.
If they're doing the live video, how would they know that the child's probably not paying attention?
We used a closed circuit camera set up in the original studies. This was actually done while Skype was just becoming a thing. And so there was a camera pointed at the child that the researcher could see. So there was a two-way interaction. There was the ability to see each other. Nowadays, of course, with Skype, you have the picture of the person's face in the corner, right? And so it was emulating what Skype would end up being.
How many kids were in the study, and what were their ages?
The children were 2 and 2.5, so 24 months and 30 months. And so the range of age was right around that.
What were your findings from the study?
What we found was that if the person on the screen was interactive, so was Skyping, that still didn't help children. So whether it was a video that was pre-taped, so it was like television, or whether the person was actually Skyping, pausing, waiting for the child's attention, they still did not learn the novel word for the novel object when it was on video. For both ages of children, if the person was face-to-face, then they learned from it.
What does that suggest?
Well, what it suggests is that where we thought perhaps if a person is really interacting through Skype, that children, these toddlers, would be able to learn from it. But it actually isn't helping. So that's a good thing to know when people are trying to figure out, well, then how could you help a child to learn from video or to learn from Skyping?
For parents, what type of takeaways would they take away from this study?
Well, what's needed for children to learn from video or from Skype is a person in the room, the person who's watching with them that supports their learning. Older children certainly can learn by themselves from television or from Skyping, but for very young children, they need their parent support. They may need their parent pointing out the connections, and that will help them. We have a lot of research with all different ages of young children now that is showing that what really makes the difference is to have a co-viewer, somebody that's watching with you, that's helping you to get the connection between something on the screen and something happening in the real world.
Are there certain things that parents can say or do as they're co-watching with their kids to help them learn that word?
Labeling it themselves. So for instance, if you were watching a video that was to teach children words, or you're watching a video and there were words in it that you wanted your child to know, repeating the word, talking about the object, talking about, for instance, if the child was interested in automobiles, in cars and vehicles, talking about them, making connections to the real world. Like, do you remember when we saw the taxi cab yesterday, or when we saw the truck? And so really, we're finding that at this age, children learn best from real experience with the real world. But if you want them to learn from screens, then it's good to make those connections, to label things yourself, and to make connections to what they've seen in reality.
Walk me through what you had the kids do in the study.
Children watch a person on a screen or the same person sitting across the table from them. And in each case, the person demonstrates, shows two objects, places one object into an opaque container, you can't see through it, so that was that blue bucket, and one into a transparent container that you can see through. And then what the child needs to do in order to learn the word is to use the social cues of the person who's either on the screen or across the table from them. And that is tipping the bucket toward it and looking into it and labeling it. They can't just learn by association, because the thing that's visible is the wrong thing when this object is being labeled. Then we just direct attention to this one by mentioning 3 sentences about it without labeling the object. That's to equate everything. We also change the location of the objects and which one is labeled with the novel name, Modi, which one is labeled with the novel name across children.
Is there anything that I didn't ask you that you feel that parents should know about this particular study, or what they can do at home with their kids to help them with learning?
I think there are different roles that screens have in families' lives. So one common thing that people use Skype for is for social interaction, social connection with their relatives, right? Or when dad or mom is out of town on a business trip. And other people's research indicates that if it's having that warmth and social connection between family members, that's actually what Skype is good for. So even young children this age do very well being comforted or having a warm feeling about the people on the screen. And that's been experimentally tested. What is harder is for children this age, and that's age 2 to 3 and younger. It's harder for them to learn from the screen. They actually at this age do much better learning from the real world. And then there's other things that we might use screens for. So sometimes parents just need a break, or they need their child to be quiet. They need to distract their child. And you know, that comes with consequences, because we have to figure out how children don't want that screen all the time. When can you say no? But within reason, to use that to give parents a minute, that might be a role that some parents will use for screens. But as far as learning goes, that happens later when they're older.
Is there any other work that's coming out of this, or works that this is based off of?
Well, we do have a lot of research with very different tasks, not just naming an object, but other things where you're trying to get a child to learn how to do a skill or how to find something. And that also shows the same pattern. But what we're doing now is trying to figure out, well, what could you do to use screens to help parents to learn something? So we're now developing ebooks for slightly older children, where a person on the screen or a character on the screen could give parents tips that would help them to really support their child's language development while reading ebooks. So it's not to say that technology can't give us good things, but that it's it depends on what it is, it depends on their age, and it depends on what the people are doing in the room to help support their learning. Yeah, this is just like one study out of a whole series of studies, right? And it is an artificial situation, naming a strange object. Mm-hmm. You know, so the point of naming the strange object is that it's not something they've seen before, and that the word is not something they've heard before. And so they're made up words and objects from the hardware store or something, you know. So in these studies in the lab, they are artificial situations. So the objects that the children are shown are not things they've seen before. We buy them at the hardware store, or we find them some way where they wouldn't have been exposed to them before. And we have made up words. And the reason to do that, of course, is to make sure that the children don't accidentally know the word that we're teaching them, right? But this kind of procedure has been used in lots of word learning studies for people who just study language development. So it's a very common procedure. Also in our studies, the thing that is labeled is in the container you can't see through. It's put in the blue bucket. And the thing that is not being labeled is referred to a couple of times attention is drawn to it and the person looks at it, it's in a transparent container. So if the children were just learning by association, whatever word they hear goes with it, whatever thing they can see, then they should connect the word with what's in the transparent container. What's the tricky part and the hard part would be if children can learn the thing but they can't see it while it's being labeled. But there's lots of research showing that as long as it's face-to-face, children can follow the person's gaze into the bucket and can connect the label to the thing that the person is looking at, even though they can't see it.